My name is Richard Miller. I'm 58, and for 25 years I was the Chief Operating Officer of Continental Logistics, a multinational logistics company headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. When I started, it only had 3 distribution centers. When they fired me, we had 47 branches across the United States and contracts with over 200 suppliers. I wasn't just an employee, I was the living memory of that company. I knew every route, every supplier, every legacy system that kept that operation running. I knew Interstate Trucking's truck was always late on Mondays because the main driver had family issues. I knew our partnership with Memphis Distribution depended on a personal relationship I'd built over 15 years. I knew exactly which systems could fail and when. But to Michael Vance, our new 38-year-old CEO, fresh out of a Silicon Valley tech startup, I was just legacy cost that needed to be eliminated. The firing happened on a Thursday in March at 2 p.m. Michael called me into his office, along with HR Director Jennifer Walsh. No small talk, no lead-up, he got straight to the point. "Rick, your position is being eliminated," he said, fiddling with his MacBook without even looking me in the eye. "You cost $185,000 a year, plus benefits. We can hire 2 junior analysts for that amount and use AI to optimize operations." I was silent for a few seconds, not from shock, but from clarity. In that moment, I understood Michael had no idea what he was doing. "Nothing personal, Rick," he continued. "It's just business. The industry is changing, and we need to adapt or die." Jennifer slid an envelope across the table. "Standard severance package, 2 months' salary and 90 days of health plan continuation through Cobra." "I understand," I replied calmly. "I appreciate the 25 years of opportunity." Michael seemed surprised by my controlled reaction. He probably expected pleas or arguments, but I'd seen the signs for months. For the past 6 months, Michael had been excluding me from important strategic meetings. He hired a consulting firm, McKinsey & Associates, to evaluate operational efficiencies. Young consultants who barely knew the difference between LTL and FTL shipping started questioning methods I'd developed over decades. When I suggested documenting our critical systems and supplier relationship protocols, Michael rejected it as too expensive and unnecessary. "We have everything in the system," he said. But I knew we didn't. What Michael didn't know was that I'd started my own retirement plan 5 years ago. Not the company's 401k, something far more strategic. I left that office without drama, gathered my personal belongings, and walked out. Some colleagues looked at me with pity. If they knew what I knew, they'd be worried about themselves, not me. That night, sitting at my home in Marietta sipping Maker's Mark bourbon, I turned on my personal laptop and opened an encrypted folder I'd created years ago. Project Phoenix, I'd named it. Inside were copies of all supplier network diagrams, legacy equipment operation manuals, details of contracts that weren't digitized, and, most importantly, an automated monitoring system I'd discreetly developed to detect failures in our supply chain. Michael thought he was getting rid of a cost. In reality, he had just removed the only safety net keeping Continental Logistics running. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Jennifer from HR, her voice anxious. "Rick, we need to talk." "Rick, we need to talk," Jennifer said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "We're having some operational issues." "What kind of issues?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The routing system Michael implemented is causing massive delays. We've lost 3 big contracts this week alone. Walmart canceled our Southeast distribution agreement. Michael is, well, he'd like to know if you'd be willing to help us as a temporary consultant." I chuckled softly. Just 3 weeks after firing me for being too expensive, they wanted to pay me as a consultant, which costs at least 3 times as much as an employee. "Jennifer, I no longer have access to the company's systems, and all the documentation you needed was in the files Michael deemed unnecessary. Rick, please. The situation is really critical. We can offer $300 an hour plus expenses." "Thanks for the offer, but I'm enjoying my retirement," I replied, and hung up. The truth was, I wasn't retired. I was too busy watching the collapse I had predicted. My Project Phoenix wasn't just a collection of documents. 5 years ago, when I realized the company might eventually discard me, I started building something I called a preventive alert system. Using my industry contacts and software I developed in my free time, I created an independent monitoring network that tracked the health of Continental's supply chain. The system operated through 3 layers: supplier performance monitoring, analysis of legacy equipment failure patterns, and tracking of critical business relationships. When any of these elements reached pre-established risk levels, alerts were automatically sent to a list of industry contacts. What Michael didn't know was that 60% of Continental's operational efficiency depended on systems and relationships that existed only in my head and in my personal network. For instance, our largest supplier in Kansas City, Midwest Transport Solutions, had a verbal agreement with me for priority in emergencies. That agreement was never officially documented because it was based on mutual trust built over 12 years. When Michael tried to renegotiate the terms via email, using cold corporate language, they simply started treating Continental like any other customer. The AI system Michael had implemented, developed by the Boston-based startup Tech Logistics, looked impressive on paper. It promised algorithmic real-time route optimization and cost reductions of up to 35%. What it didn't consider was that the algorithm was being fed incomplete data. Continental's legacy systems, some of them running on 15-year-old servers, had quirks I knew intimately. The inventory system at the Memphis branch, for example, had a bug that duplicated orders every time the system was rebooted after a power outage. I had created a manual protocol to circumvent this, but it was never officially documented because it worked perfectly with my direct supervision. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not from Continental, but from its suppliers and customers. Tom Bradley from Interstate Trucking called me on a Tuesday. "Rick, what the hell is going on with you guys? You emailed us to cancel our 8-year partnership, no explanation." Sarah Chen from Pacific Distribution called the same day. "Rick, Continental isn't honoring agreed-upon deadlines. We're going to have to look for other suppliers." I listened, took notes, but offered no solutions. It wasn't my problem anymore. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Michael's AI system, without the contextual data I provided, started making catastrophic choices. It routed a shipment of perishable pharmaceuticals through Arizona in the middle of summer, resulting in a $2.3 million loss in medications. It directed 3 trucks onto a route I knew had been under construction for 6 months, causing 2-day delays for Amazon Prime. But the worst was yet to come. My monitoring system detected something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Continental was about to lose its biggest contract with Target Corporation. The contract was worth $18 million annually and required 99.2% on-time delivery. They had been operating at 87% for the past 4 weeks. Michael, apparently, had no idea how critical this contract was. In a meeting I monitored through an internal contact, yes, I still had allies there, he said that some temporary efficiency issues were normal during transition periods. What he didn't know was that Target's logistics director, Jim Morrison, was my former colleague from my time at UPS 20 years ago. Jim called me personally. "Rick, I heard you left Continental. That's a shame. I always respected your work." "Thanks, Jim. How are things?" "To be honest, we're considering changes. Continental isn't delivering to the standards we agreed on. You wouldn't be interested in discussing an opportunity with FedEx Supply Chain, would you?" I smiled. FedEx was one of Continental's biggest competitors. "That might be interesting," I replied. That same night, Michael called me personally. It was almost midnight. "Rick, I need to talk to you." His voice was strained, unlike the arrogant confidence of 3 weeks ago. "Can we meet tomorrow? I have a proposal that might interest you." "Sure, Michael, but I need to warn you. My consulting fee is now $500 an hour with upfront payment." There was a long pause. "All right. Can we meet at the Starbucks on Peachtree at 10 a.m.? I prefer the office. After all, it's about business, isn't it?" Michael was waiting in the conference room when I arrived at Continental the next morning. His appearance had changed dramatically in a month. His always impeccable suit was now wrinkled. His eyes had deep dark circles, and he nervously fiddled with his iPhone as if expecting bad news at any moment. "Rick, thank you for coming," he said, standing up quickly. "I want to get straight to the point. We need you back." I sat down calmly and opened my laptop. "I'm listening." "The situation, it's gotten more complicated than we expected. We've lost $12 million in contracts in the last 2 weeks. The tech logistics system isn't working as promised, and our suppliers are," he hesitated, "not being very collaborative." "And what exactly would you like me to do?" Michael took a deep breath. "We want to offer you the position of Vice President of Operations, salary of $220,000, plus performance-based bonuses. You would have full autonomy to reverse these temporary difficulties." I remained silent for a few seconds, pretending to consider the offer. In reality, I was calculating how many more millions they would lose by the end of the month. "Michael, I have 2 questions. First, do you still believe I was too expensive a month ago?" He flushed. "Rick, that was a strategic decision based on projections that turned out to be inaccurate. Second question, do you have any idea why Tom Bradley from Interstate Trucking canceled your contract?" His silence was the answer I expected. "Tom canceled because you sent a terms renegotiation email written by an intern, treating an 8-year partnership as if it were just some random Fiverr gig. Tom called me personally to ask if I'd lost my mind." Michael was visibly uncomfortable. "We can fix this. With you back, we can win back those suppliers." "Maybe," I replied. "But first, I need to understand the extent of the problem. Can I see the operational reports from the last month?" He slid a folder across the table. As I flipped through the documents, the situation revealed itself to be even worse than I had imagined. Continental had lost not only contracts, but also 3 key employees I had personally trained. David Park, our best West Coast routing coordinator, had been fired for questioning management decisions. In fact, David had tried to warn about problems my system had already detected weeks earlier. Lisa Henderson, Chicago branch supervisor, had resigned after Michael ignored her recommendations on preventive equipment maintenance. Now, 2 of the branch's main barcode scanners were broken, causing 4 6-hour delays in all operations. But what worried me most was discovering that Michael had tried to sell some of the company's non-essential assets. Among them, the proprietary inventory management software I had developed in partnership with a freelance programmer in 2018. This software was integrated into all our legacy systems, and its removal would cause a total collapse of operations. "Michael, I see here that you tried to sell our customized inventory system?" "Yes, we received an interesting offer from CompTech Solutions, $1.2 million. We thought we could just use an off-the-shelf system." I closed the folder slowly. "Do you have any idea that this system is integrated into 23 different operational modules, and that replacing it would take at least 8 months of development?" The look on his face told me no, he had no idea. "Rick, look, maybe we made some tactical errors, but with your experience, we can fix all this in a few weeks." "A few weeks?" I laughed for the first time in the meeting. "Michael, you don't have a few weeks. Your contract with Target will be canceled on Friday if performance doesn't improve to 95%. You're operating at 83%. Home Depot has already communicated that they're cutting orders by 40% next quarter, and FedEx is offering 15% lower prices to your 3 largest remaining clients." Michael went pale. "How do you know all this?" "Because, unlike you, I understand that logistics is a business of relationships, not algorithms." At that moment, his phone rang. He answered with a tense expression. "Yes, Jennifer? What? No, that can't be happening. When?" His voice progressively rose. "What do you mean, total system failure?" He hung up and looked at me in despair. "The Atlanta data center just went down. Apparently there was a system overload on the main server, and our backups aren't working." I knew exactly what had happened. Continental's main server ran on 2009 hardware that I'd been asking to replace for 3 years. It had a quirk. When overloaded with data processing above a specific limit, something my monitoring system carefully tracked, it would go into a cascading failure. Michael's AI system, trying to process real-time routes to compensate for accumulated delays, had finally pushed the server beyond its capacity. How long to restore the system? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They said 48 to 72 hours. Michael, do you have any idea what 72 hours without a system means for a logistics company? He shook his head, defeated. It means by Monday you won't have a company anymore. I stood up and closed my laptop. My offer is this: $750,000 paid up front for a 30-day emergency consultancy. No guarantee of results, just my best effort. Rick, that's almost 4 times your annual salary. That was my annual salary when I was just legacy cost. Now I'm your only chance of survival. Michael was silent for long seconds, probably calculating if the company had the liquidity to pay. I need to talk to the board, he finally said. You have until 5 p.m. today, I replied, walking towards the door. After that, I'll be busy helping FedEx manage the contracts you're going to lose. I left Continental knowing the final moment had arrived. Michael would finally understand the true cost of discarding experience in favor of spreadsheets and algorithms. Michael didn't call me at 5 p.m. In fact, he didn't call me that day. At 7:30 p.m., I received a call from Robert Chen, CEO of FedEx Supply Chain Southeast Division. Rick, I heard through Jim Morrison that you're available. We have a proposal that might interest you. The next morning, while having coffee in my kitchen in Marietta, I read the headline in the Atlanta Business Chronicle: Continental Logistics faces operational collapse after system failure. The article mentioned that the company had lost $18 million in contracts in the last month and was facing potential bankruptcy proceedings. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Michael, and his voice was completely broken. Rick, the board approved it. The $750,000. When can you start? Michael, I replied calmly. Yesterday was the deadline. Today is a new day, with new prices. Please, Rick, the whole company will go bankrupt. 300 people will lose their jobs. 300 people you should have considered before you fired me for being too expensive, I retorted. But I have a counteroffer. There was silence on the other end. I'm taking over as VP of Operations for FedEx Supply Chain next Monday. Salary of $280,000 plus profit sharing, plus a $5 million budget to build my own team. They want to expand rapidly in the Southeast region, and guess where they'll be looking for the best clients? Rick, you can't do this. You built Continental. This company is your life. No, Michael, I built a company. You destroyed it. Those are different things. I hung up the phone and never spoke to Michael Vance again. The following Monday, I started at FedEx. My first decision was to hire David Park, Lisa Henderson, and other former Continental employees whom Michael had either fired or who had resigned. Within 2 weeks, we had an elite team made up of people who truly understood logistics. My second decision was to implement a program I called Legacy Knowledge Integration, a system where experienced professionals mentored young talent, combining practical experience with modern technology. It wasn't about resisting change, but ensuring that change was intelligent. What happened in the following months was almost poetic. Continental Logistics declared bankruptcy in June. The proceedings revealed that Michael had inflated efficiency numbers to attract investors for a merger that never materialized. Furthermore, it was discovered that he had received $1.2 million in bonuses based on these false metrics, while firing employees to cut costs. Michael was sued by investors for mismanagement and fraud. His Stanford MBA and his startup background didn't save him when the real numbers came to light. Last I heard, he was trying to get a middle management position at a consulting firm in Phoenix. FedEx, meanwhile, grew 340% in the Southeast region in 8 months. We won not only Continental's former clients, but also contracts they could never close because they lacked the necessary expertise. The target contract, worth $18 million annually? Jim Morrison personally reached out to me. Rick, we know you understand our needs. Can we talk? We closed a $25 million annual contract with a guaranteed 99.5% performance, something Continental could never offer. But the real satisfaction came 6 months later, during an American Logistics Association conference in Nashville. I was presenting our Legacy Knowledge Integration program when I noticed Michael in the audience, clearly uncomfortable. After my presentation, he approached. He was noticeably thinner, wearing a suit that looked cheap compared to his usual standards. "Rick, good presentation. Can I talk to you for a minute?" We walked to a more private corner of the convention center. "I wanted to apologize," he said, avoiding eye contact. I didn't truly understand what you did at Continental. I thought experience was just old knowledge." "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand that experience is tested knowledge. It's knowing what works and, more importantly, what doesn't work and why." I nodded. "Michael, you're not a bad person. You're just young and you were arrogant. The difference is arrogance can be corrected. Stupidity cannot." He laughed bitterly. "It was an expensive lesson to learn. For you and for 300 families who lost their jobs," I replied. We parted civilly. I felt pity for him, but no remorse. Today, 2 years later, I run FedEx's largest logistics operation in the Southeast. My team has 450 people, mixing seasoned veterans with brilliant young talent. We develop innovative technologies, but always based on solid fundamentals. David Park is now my vice president of West Coast operations. Lisa Henderson runs our Chicago division. Both earn 60% more than they did at Continental and have profit sharing. The most ironic part? Tech Logistics, the startup that developed the AI system that replaced my work at Continental, went bankrupt 3 months after Continental did. It turned out their algorithm only worked under ideal conditions, something any experienced logistics professional could have warned them about. Recently, I received an email from a headhunter asking if I knew any senior logistics professionals with proven experience for a startup that wanted to revolutionize the industry with AI. I replied that I knew several, but they were all busy working for companies that understood the value of experience. The truth is, I never sought revenge against Michael or Continental. I didn't need to. They destroyed themselves with their own decisions, their own arrogance, their own ignorance about the value of accumulated knowledge. I learned that the best revenge isn't the one you plan. It's the one that happens naturally when you keep excelling at what you do, while your detractors get lost in their own delusions. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment with your thoughts, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share it with someone who also values experience and knowledge. Until next time.